If you can hear me, clap once. If you can hear me, clap once. Historic day for those of you who have been at the plenary session with the endorsement of the voluntary guidelines on gender equality. I was actually hoping for some ululations. Is that too much to ask for? It's been a long 2 years of negotiation, so it is really, really great that we have the voluntary guidelines endorsed. And thank you to all of you that have been part of this process. So many thanks to our partners and co-organizers of this important event on achieving gender equality, food security, and nutrition, and how we can use multi-stakeholder initiatives and approaches. The goal of this session is to show how we can use all our comparative advantages as actors in the food system to address the intersection between gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls and their food and nutrition security. This afternoon, we will hear from multiple stakeholders, first of the Multi-Partner Trust Fund and Joint Program on accelerating progress towards rural women's economic empowerment, which is an initiative of FAO, IFAD, UN Women, and WFP. The program aims to secure rural women's livelihoods, rights, and resilience through its comprehensive package of sequenced interventions. It offers a holistic approach to tackle structural gender inequalities that prevent rural women and girls from realizing their economic rights and their autonomy. We will also hear from the Global Project Food Security and Resilience Building of Germany, which focuses on women of reproductive age and children up to 2 years in rural areas in Africa and Asia. This program aims to improve the food situation and their resilience to hunger crisis. In Togo, which we will hear from today, the project aims to improve the nutritional status of children and their mothers through a multi-sectoral and food-based approach. We are honored today to be joined by the CFS chairperson, Ambassador Gabriel Ferrero, and in a slight change to the agenda, Ambassador Ferrero will be here with us to provide closing remarks. We are also delighted to be joined by His Excellency Dan Eriksson, State Secretary to the Minister for Rural Affairs of Sweden. As a longtime donor and supporter of the Joint Program on Rural Women's Economic Empowerment, we are grateful for your presence and ongoing commitment to the multi-stakeholder approach of this program. Sweden's support is a great testament of how long-term commitment to gender equality can make a difference. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Well, thank you for that, and dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, and I say friends, I'm very pleased to be here at CFS 51 and to be taking part in this very important side event with you. It's my second side event for this day, and I learned a lot for the first one, so I hope the same can be at this event. The challenges we collectively face reaffirm the need for us to work together to come up with joint solutions and innovative collaborations that help strengthen global food security. Multilateralism is as important as ever. Despite global efforts, the world is falling short of achieving gender equality and SDG 5. In fact, as concluded in the FAO report, The Status of Women in Agrifood Systems, which I had the pleasure to speak at the launch of in April, gender equality is regressing. Reports show that if current trends continue, over 340 million women and girls, an estimated 8% of the world's female population, will live in extreme poverty by 2030. And close to 1 in 4 will experience moderate or severe food insecurity. We know that women produce the majority of the food in developing countries and are responsible for half of the world's food production, yet their critical role as food producers and providers to household food security is still to be fully recognized. In the face of these grave challenges, it's my great honor to open this highly relevant side event on achieving gender equality, food security, and nutrition. This session will focus on exploring solutions and sharing good practices of how multi-stakeholder approaches can be designed to effectively tackle structural barriers to gender equality. We will hear from a range of speakers on their efforts and lessons learned from different countries on the use of gender transformative approaches. Such good practices are key to the implementation of the CFS Voluntary Guidelines on gender equality and women's and girls' empowerment, just endorsed in plenary. The guidelines serve to acknowledge the important link between strengthening gender equality and women's and girls' empowerment on the one hand, and improved food security and nutrition on the other. Indeed, a growing body of evidence supports the notion that investing in the rights and empowerment of women and girls is one of the most effective ways to improve food security and nutrition outcomes. Sweden is firmly committed to gender equality and women's and girls' empowerment, and proudly funds the joint program on rural women's economic empowerment, which is a global initiative with the overarching aim of securing rural women's livelihoods, rights, and resilience. The program is jointly implemented by WFP, FAO, IFAD, and UN Women, and include key dimensions of women's economic empowerment, while recognizing women as champions of resilience and agricultural development. It's our view that the program is a good practice in line with the voluntary guidelines, and we would invite additional partners to support the program to accelerate progress towards strengthening women's economic empowerment. And I hope you will enjoy the session here. Thanks.
Thank you very much, and especially for highlighting the important role that women play in agri-food systems, and reiterating that the best investments that we can actually make for food systems transformation is investing in women and girls. I would now like to invite Renata Heilen, who's the Principal Administrator, European Commission Directorate General for International Partnerships. Thank you so much for joining us, and I invite you to take the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much, moderator. A great welcome also to everybody here in the room and in the virtual room, and I'm very honored to provide the co-opening remarks here. The event endeavors to show some of the multi-stakeholder initiatives and approaches aiming at advancing gender equality, food security, and nutrition. We have already applauded the endorsement of the voluntary guidelines earlier today. Gender equality, women's and girls' empowerment, food security, and nutrition are complex and include sensitive and interconnected issues. Navigating these different layers requires knowledge, experience, and collaboration. The voluntary guidelines are an example of a multi-stakeholder initiatives in that sense and the result of long and at times hefty negotiations. At CFS 50 last year, we heard many expressions of support for concluding the work on the guidelines in national and regional statements and for the first ever cross-regional statement delivered in the CFS context. There was sincere commitment to gender equality and recognition that the complexity and sensitivity of the matters deserves longer and deeper discussions. And the CFS has offered, once again, an inclusive space to discuss and search solutions for challenges in the context of food security and nutrition that require multilateral and multi-stakeholder responses. The EU, along with its member states, commit to leverage these guidelines to realize our collective aspiration for zero hunger, gender equality, and partnership for the goals. We hope that the guidelines will be used by all members and all stakeholders wishing to advance gender equality, women's and girls' rights, and women's empowerment as part of the efforts to eradicate hunger, food insecurity, and malnutrition. This side event offers also a good platform to share lessons and experience that can help with implementing these guidelines and raise awareness of governments, donors, and organizations to continue to give women's empowerment and nutrition top priority. The joint program on rural women economic empowerment by the FAO, IFAD, World Food Programme, and UN Women, Germany's multi-sectoral food security program and building resilience, PROSECAL, and the EU's joint program on gender transformative approaches with the UN RWEE agencies offer tools, approaches, and methodologies to facilitate the application of the voluntary guidelines in practice. These programs align with the objective of the voluntary guidelines to promote gender equality and empower women and girls in the context of food security and nutrition. They demonstrate how a comprehensive approach can address the complex factors in contributing to food insecurity and malnutrition among women and girls. We have already heard that women and girls assume multiple responsibilities in the food chain, guaranteeing the household food security. They are farmers, they process and trade food, they generate income for the family. And evidently, healthy women and girls who do not suffer themselves from malnutrition can assume all these tasks much better. Thereby, they contribute to socioeconomic progress for their families, communities, and nations. There is ample evidence-based data through studies and reports that raise awareness of the benefits of moves towards healthier and environmental sustainable food production and consumption for individuals. We expect decision makers, including politicians, to use the data and information to enhance women's food security and nutrition. Following the endorsement of the voluntary guidelines, the use of the Minimum Dietary Diversity for Women indicator, one of the initiatives we will learn about at this event, could be promoted as an appropriate indicator to monitor impact and progress towards achieving SDG 2. Including such a healthy diet indicator is crucial to well-position healthy and sustainable diets within the international agenda and to lay the groundwork for future developments. The aim is to empower women by addressing multiple aspects of their lives, including the quality of their diet, to ensure a healthier and more equitable future for all. The new guidelines are a baseline. They provide a valuable framework in an area where no such guidance has existed so far. Any committed actors, governments, and donors can evidently go further in their policies and programs As EU, we are committed to extending our support to gender transformative approaches. This is a term that was not accepted in the guidelines. Term and concept. And we are pleased that we have already been able to work with the FAO, the World Food Programme, and IFAD on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And indeed, we cannot achieve food security without addressing structural gender inequalities. And with thanks to a lot of the support and leadership you have shown in the use of gender transformative approaches. So the guidelines endorsed this morning are a lighthouse to guide us as we do the work that we do. But impact must happen with and for women and girls on the ground. We will now turn to the experiences from the country level of these two programs to make them come to life and highlight their alignment with the voluntary guidelines. First, focusing on the joint program on rural women's economic empowerment in Rwanda, we will now hear from John Bosco Murangira, who's the national coordinator in Rwanda based at the World Food Programme. Over to you, John Bosco.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jemima, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure for me to be here to share our experiences on the joint program on rural women empowerment in Rwanda. As it was rightly mentioned, we are implementing this program which aims to secure the rights and resilience of rural women, and also in our implementation, we implement in line with the 4 intermarked outcome areas. 1 focuses on increased food security and nutrition. Outcome 2 focuses on increased income and economic autonomy. Outcome 3 focuses on women's leadership and participation, as well as the creation of a gender-responsive policy framework. In Rwanda, this program will target women with high levels of poverty, food insecurity, as well as poor nutrition. And this includes women facing intersecting forms of discrimination, such as women living with disabilities, people living with HIV/AIDS, and victims of gender-based violence. So in our targeting, we have been dealing with people who are having special needs and vulnerabilities. Also, as it was rightly mentioned, as a holistic program, there are many components, program strategies, as well as approaches. But today, allow me to focus on our initiative of working with cooperatives, which are the core of the GEWGE approach. Phase 1 of the joint program in Rwanda, which started in 2015 and we concluded in 2021, we managed to reach more than 18,000 beneficiaries. And we managed to group them into more than 51 cooperatives that are currently sustainable and also being linked to other multiple opportunities. To mention also that phase 2 of the program, which we have just recently started, we have managed to enroll more than 8,000 direct beneficiaries. And from this start, we are seeing more than 200 groups being coming together, which we shall continue to accompany to make sure that at the end of 5 years, we shall be able to have also cooperatives that will be sustained and having multiple opportunities. According to global evaluation of phase 1, the cooperative approach actually emerged as a very powerful transformative element. Not only did the cooperatives facilitate economic empowerment, but they also contributed to building women's social capital. In Rwanda, the cooperative model works at multiple levels to enable women to overcome barriers of gender equality. And to achieve this, we actually managed to do a number of activities which I would like to share with you. 1, there was a lot of emphasis on capacity and skills development in production techniques, including nutrition-sensitive agriculture and climate-smart technologies. Also, interventions were around post-harvest handling as well as production transformation for rural women products. Also, access to information and formal credit and financial services was very key, as well as access to inputs and agricultural technologies. Linking these groups to extension services and local development planning services also was another core element of this program. To mention that access to markets, including development linkages to larger sustainable markets, was very transformative and very much also appreciated by these women and their cooperatives. To start with, we had these women groups that were informal and they started by micro-learning between themselves. And getting access to credit and microloans created a stronger trust amongst themselves. And catching up from here, we had to build on individual collective skills, and GPD supported the groups to become formally structured and recognized by the Rwandan government. This brought women into mainstream and opened greater access to formal credit, information, services, as well as other greater economic opportunities. To mention that, empowering women through having access to savings and credit enabled them to purchase small livestock, which provided manure that increased yields, as well as vegetables and for livestock production. Women adopted various improved production techniques, such as irrigation and the use of biofertilizers, which led to increased productivity. And we are happy to see that at the end of the phase one of this program, more than 80% had increased their agricultural production. Also, more households started to consume proteins such as eggs and meat, as well as fruits and vegetables from the kitchen gardens also that the program helped them to set up and sustain. The end survey findings also showed that improved nutrition led to less expenditure on health services, and more disposable income was available for women to purchase food and other items like supporting their children with the school fees, as well as on health insurance. And to mention that most of them and the majority of these beneficiaries could actually access these services from the government. And now we're happy to see that they are able to sustain themselves. Also important to mention is that women used savings and credit from the cooperatives to buy additional communal land, which has also facilitated increasing production as well as income generation. I would like to highlight that it was also through cooperatives that women were able to engage with multiple actors involved in the economic empowerment. For example, if I can highlight microfinance institutions that we try to bring together so that we can work together to provide trainings around financial literacy, capacity building, and also they could encourage these women to have bank accounts and also introduce them to mobile banking and train them around designing viable micro projects, of which they were also able to access financing, where actually majority of them could access microfinance lendings for the very first time. Important to mention that the use of ICT and digital services transformed the way women work, the way women save, and this saved time and also increased the access to information. Engaging with the private sector, including suppliers and other off-takers, was also very key. And one of the biggest challenges that women were facing was trying to move out of small-scale production and move further up to the value chains in the economic actors. I can mention that the capacity building provided by the program around production led to women producing higher quality produce in greater quantities, as well as enabled them to engage with markets beyond small-scale local markets. This includes supplying to school feeding programs, as well as initiatives, and the majority of food manufacturers in Rwanda have been linked to these smallholder farmers and their cooperatives. Also, others managed to enter into formal contracting to supply their produce to larger buyers that offers premium prices. Critical to this was advocacy with suppliers, which the program did, as well as linking and engaging them with other key off-takers involved in this sector. Of course, I have to mention that we also worked extensively with the government throughout implementation of this program, ensuring that cooperatives become embedded in the government systems, including in planning, and also we're able to make sure that these cooperatives have interventions around the proximity of the extension services. Also working with agro-dealers, which played a big part in building their confidence, as well as in land use and farming systems. Before I conclude, I would like to mention that cooperatives has been a very transformative approach, and also working with multiple stakeholders have managed and helped us to yield maximum results that we have seen out of transformation for the women-supported cooperative. And also we have seen knowledge transfer from the supported cooperative to the nearby communities, and we aim to scale this further as we implement phase 2 of this program. And allow me to welcome here the video of one of the participants so that you can watch what the cooperatives have managed to help them to achieve. I really appreciate and thank you so much. This was very appreciated, and I'm happy to learn from you and from this audience. Thank you so much.
Umugore wo mu cyaro agira ibibazo bitandukanye, nk'uri mu rugo rwa wenyine atarabashije kwishyira hamwe n'abandi, akenshi akunda kwiyumvamo ko ari uwo gutegekwa no gusaba agahabwa. Kenshi turahinga tukajyana mu murima guhinga tukanasarurana, ariko iyo umusaruro ugeze mu nzu, umudamu ijambo rye risa nkaho rigarukiye mu gusarura. Iyo bigeze mu nzu usanga abagabo umubare munini aribo bafata ibyemezo ku kizava muri uwo musaruro. Ariko bano barwika bikunda kumpugura ku bijyanye n'ubuhinzi bw'imboga n'imbuto, niko narushagaho kumenya buryo ki igihingwa kitabwaho kikiri gito. Twahoraga mu bihombo duhinga bikuma, twongera tugatera, nkaho byagize ngo bigeze igihe cyo kurabya bikuma, ariko aho rero tuboneye aya mahirwe, ariko twakomeje kubigaragaza, ndetse barabanza batuzanira amarozwari nayo dushyiraho ukabona ntibikunda, batuzanira rwiduha na moteri zuhira, nazo noneho zije tubona ama essence kuhira rimwe bigasaba amafaranga agera mu bihumbi 6-7. Baduha iyo mirasire, kuvana imirasire tuyibonye rero tukuhira, ubuzima bwarahindutse. Twatangiye kubikoresha mu kwezi kwa 2 nibwo byari birangiye dutangiye kuhira, ariko muri uko kwa 2 hari ibyo twari twateye duhinze nk'abahinzi basanzwe, tubikomezanyamo n'amazi, nyine ntibyigera bibura amazi. Rero kugeza kano kanya nuvuga ngo turava mu kwa 2 tugera hano, mu musaruro twakagiye tubona nuva tumaze kubona amafaranga agera ku 700. RWEE yaradufashije ku buryo bushoboka, kandi si kuri njye jyenyine, ntabwo ari njyewe jyenyine, abanyamuryango hari impinduka.
Thank you very much, John Bosco.
Good afternoon, everyone, and namaste. My name is Rachna Bhattrai, and I have coordinated.
I don't know what happened. Yeah, but I wanted to thank John Bosco for really bringing this to the reality on the ground, but also to Goretti and that powerful message, because what we really see is women as agents of change. What we see is the power of women's collective action. And what we see is what our role is. It is really accompanying women and girls as they work towards their empowerment, and how we facilitate this process for them to access and have control over their resources, their labor, their time, and their own nutrition. So with that, I'll now turn to our video from Rachana Bhattarai, who's the Joint Program on Rural Women's Economic Empowerment National Coordinator for Nepal, and a staff of UN Women who, as you've seen, is joining us on video.
Good afternoon, everyone, and namaste. My name is Rachana Bhattarai, and I have coordinated the GEWGE in Nepal for a number of years. And it gives me great pleasure to be able to share some of our experiences with you, particularly in light of the endorsement of the voluntary guidelines. In Nepal, the joint program on rural women's economic empowerment is implemented in communities with deeply embedded social norms that discriminate against women and girls and act as barriers to realizing their rights and empowerment. The majority of women are not even allowed out of their homes without the permission of male family members. And these women are not able to engage in economic activities or travel to markets and are often excluded from accessing inputs and services for agriculture production. At meal times, women are usually the last to eat whatever is left over. So given this context, one of the core approaches of the GEWGE is to engage men and boys in working to change social norms. We do this through engaging faith leaders and local leaders and engaging men at household and community levels. We carry out awareness-raising community sensitization and the use of in-depth community empowerment methodologies such as the Gender Action Learning System, known as GALS. GALS enables families to sit together and analyze their household dynamics and envision a more equitable future. In the first phase of our program, the GALS qualitative assessment found, among other things, that the process had resulted in men willingly taking on domestic chores such as child caring, sharing agriculture activities, and making economic decisions together with their wives. We saw that when women are empowered and their role as economic actors was valued and recognized by men, their confidence and self-esteem and willingness to take on leadership roles was transformed. The GEWGE also takes a human rights-based approach to programming. Women participants are made aware of international and national legislation and trained to advocate for their rights, including the right to food and the right to economic security. This is then followed by leadership training for women. We also ensure men are included in raising awareness about women's rights. For example, we held a year-long Sahiho, in Nepali we call it Sahiho, and in English it is That's Right campaign, which involved a series of messages through radio, TV, billboards to address negative social norms, alongside community meetings and focus group discussions with men. At the policy level, the GEWGE is implemented as a pilot initiative for the gender-responsive implementation of the Agriculture Development Strategy, which is a 20-year strategy of the government of Nepal. This strategy focuses on a number of areas, including women's farmers' leadership, access to finance, and access to resources and inputs. We carry out training in women's rights for the local government to support implementation of the strategy, as there is often a knowledge gap which hinders the implementation of gender-responsive policies. Training is also carried out on gender-responsive planning and budgeting, and we have seen a number of local governments subsequently allocating budgets which have enabled women to access the inputs and services they need to increase in their production and access markets. Promoting women's voice, agency, leadership, and participation is fundamental to the model of the JPRWE. Women's direct engagement and participation in government consultations has been key. In the JPRWE, different mechanism has been used to ensure dialogue between rural women and government, including consultations during local level planning processes and live interactive radio programs. The work done under the implementation of the strategy also contributed women standing for local elections, some of them whom were elected as ward members. Critical to empowering women in the context of food security and nutrition is equipping them with the necessary knowledge and skills to enhance their productive capacity. The JPRWE has supported women in lifting them out of subsistence agriculture into commercial agriculture through the transfer of technical knowledge and skills using the farmer field school approach. This includes climate-resilient agriculture techniques such as the use of seeds which require less water, drought-resistant crops, and tunnel farming which protects crop from storms and flooding and enables a year-round production of vegetables. The positive impact of this approach was clearly visible to see in the community and led to people who were not part of the program taking up the techniques, showing the multiplier effect of the JPRWE has on both households and communities. Involvement of agriculture extension services with women farmers is also important for supporting women to transition from subsistence to commercial farming. And all of the farmers groups were formally registered, which enabled them to access extension services. So regarding the results, there were many different results across the program in phase 1, reflecting the nature of the holistic interventions. Food production increased by almost 300% within the women's farmers groups, and there was a 100% increase in the quantity and frequency of vegetable consumption. 97% of supported households attend the minimum acceptable diet and improved their food consumption score. Within the program, 65% of women took up the leadership within cooperatives, and there was a 24% increase in women's leadership in producer organizations. The effects of the program on various aspects of empowerment were measured by the Women's Empowerment in Agriculture Index. This index measures the empowerment, agency, and inclusion of women in the agriculture sector. Women achieved greater empowerment across all the indicators measured. Overall, across the indicators, women were 20% more empowered, and there was an average increase of 15% in gender parity within households. There was a large positive effect on respect for women among household members. Women's input in productive decisions, control over use of income, and membership in influential groups. For example, the proportion of rural women with empowerment in control over income at the end of the program was 97%. So at the end, I would like to finish by saying that it was the holistic approach of the program and working alongside government that led to these combined positive results. Central to these were the gender transformative approaches. Bringing men on board on social norm change was key to enabling women's empowerment and improving the food security and nutrition status of household. Thank you so much, and namaste.
With many thanks to Rachana, especially for highlighting the engagement of men and boys as participants and as allies for gender equality at community level, as well as in these halls and rooms as well. So I do also recognize the allies for gender equality that are here with us, reminding us that gender equality is the responsibility of all of us. And also bringing in the issue of measurement and accountability and how we become much more accountable to change, which is a continuing thread with the next set of interventions. So I would now like to shift gear from the joint program on rural women's economic empowerment to the second set of interventions and hand over to Deborah Bandobena Wanta, a nutritionist and specialist in food science and technology who worked as a nutrition technical advisor with GIZ in Togo. As one of the largest donors in the field of food security and rural development, Germany has invested over 1.5 billion euros annually over the past 6 years through its special initiative, One World Without Hunger, which includes the Food Security and Resilience Program. Deborah will present the highlights of this project and the indicator that they are using to measure the improvement of women's diet. So over to Deborah.
Thank you for the floor, moderator. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests at the CFS and dear audience following us online, good morning and good afternoon. I'm Deborah Badombena and I work with GIZ in Togo. For the past 5 years, I've been working for the Food Security, Nutrition and Resilience program. And I'm really pleased and honored to be able to share with you today our experience on contributing to empowering and strengthening rural women capacity to improve food security and nutrition in Togo. Next, please. So in Togo, we have an overall population and also a rural population that is dominated by women. We still have a significant prevalence of severe food insecurity with a rate of 19.4%. And we still also have a high prevalence of malnutrition. So 45% of the women suffer from anemia, and 23.8, almost a quarter of children under 5 still suffer from stunting. Next, please. Next. And to a snapshot of the situation is that we have more, in Togo, we have more women in rural areas. We also have more women working in agriculture, yet they are the ones that are most affected by poverty and that are the most vulnerable to food insecurity and malnutrition. At the national level, many efforts are engaged to improve that situation. And in that context, Togo has its National Agriculture Investment Plan that focused on inclusion and rural empowerment of women, highlighting 5 key areas of work. So we have decision making, control of income, access and control of assets, leadership, and also time management. And the content of that plan is actually quite already aligned with the CFS Voluntary Guidelines that were just endorsed today. Next, please. So as the moderator just already said, our project is part of the global program that was commissioned by the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. And the objective was to support the country and contribute to improve the food security and nutrition of vulnerable women and their infants in 3 regions of Togo that you can see as the green area on the map on the right. We worked in 127 villages in 3 regions of Togo, Maritime, Kara, and Plateau. We targeted 28,500 women as well as their infants, 7,700 of them. The project ran from 2015 to 2023. Next, please. Next, please. So we had an intervention that was multi stakeholders and also multi-sectoral. We worked at the national level with decision and policy makers, the different ministries, and the National Nutrition Coordination Body. We work at the regional and municipal level with healthcare professional, agricultural advisor, and local NGOs to be able to target at the villages level, the households and the women. So our intervention also was multi-sectoral. We work with various sectors, but mainly health and agricultural sector. It was multi-stakeholders with supporting the government and involving NGOs, local communities, academia, and also the food security donors in Togo. Next, please. So to be able to improve the food security and nutrition, we adopted a nutrition sensitive agriculture approach. So basically improve nutrition through agriculture and food-based approach. We had the promotion of biofortified and nutritious crops, promotion of small-scale poultry, promotion of small-scale storage, and improved processing technologies. We also had nutrition and hygiene education, and we added to that development of income generating activities for the women beneficiaries in villages. Next, please. Next. So here are some photos of the crops that we promoted in Togo. Biofortified maize, orange sweet flesh potato, moringa, and this is a photo of the solar dryers. And next, please. Pigs bags for improved storage. Next. And the women working in cooking demonstration in the villages. Next, please. So our gender sensitive and transformative approach consisted of, first and foremost, from inception, selecting rural women as the main target and actors of the project. We also made sure to analyze the context and the gender dynamics. We conducted 3 gender baseline studies for each region to be sure to tailor all of our activities to the needs and the challenges on the field. Next, please. And directly at the level of women, we work to facilitate and increase their access to land, the land to produce nutritious crops. So through sensitizing the men, the husband accepted and were able to share more land with the wives. And the wives secured the land uh, all along for the implementation period of the project. We also facilitate the knowledge and information access through nutrition education and training on good agricultural practices in farmer feed school. We increase their access to agricultural technologies with improved seeds, small-scale solar dryers, grain mills, and also pigs that we just saw in the photos. We also worked with financial education and literacy through training on income-generating activities, finance management, and entrepreneurship. Next, please. So also we work to foster inclusion, dialogue, and cohesion. The sensitization and inclusion of men in all the beneficiaries' activities what we promoted. And we promoted it as an essential prerequisite for sustainable change. For instance, in one of the regions, we were organizing what we call the Men's Club. In French, it's homme leader. We also made sure to have a monitoring and a gender monitoring and evaluation system with data that were disaggregated by sex and indicators specific to women's health and nutritional status, such as the Individual Dietary Diversity Score and the MDD-W, the Minimum Dietary Diversity for Women. We also work supporting gender mainstreaming in governance with the training of the implementing partners on gender equity and also advocacy for gender and nutrition sensitive approaches and advocacy and capacity building specifically on the indicators, as I was saying, such as the MDD-W. Next, please. So with these action, these activities, and all the concerted effort of all the actors, we were able to reach our objective in a great and large measure and to have very interesting results. So on the agriculture aspect, we increased the production of nutritious crop with 26,600 women that produce over 6,005 tons of soya, 10,200 tons of vitamin A maize, and 1,200 tons of sweet potato, biofortified in vitamin A. On the food security and nutrition aspect, we observed that in our regions, among the beneficiaries, severe food insecurity reduced of in average 22%, and over 21,300 women improved their nutrition and their hygiene. By the end of the project, they were consuming more fruits and more green leafy vegetables. On the side of income generating activities, from 2020 to 2022, we trained 2,366 women on entrepreneurship and financial education. With that, they improved their income of, in average, 45%. They were able also to raise through savings scheme up to 326 million francs CFA. On the aspect of governance, we trained 36 governmental officers on nutrition and gender-sensitive agriculture indicators, approaches and indicators, and specifically on the MDD-W. And we were also able to hold with them technical working session to discuss the integration of the MDD-W in the National Food Security and Nutrition data collection system. Hopefully, that will be starting with the end of the year. Next, please. And as I said, we use the MDD-W to track and monitor our progress on women dietary diversity. And with that, for that, we actually conducted in each of the region baseline surveys. And at the end of the project, early this year in 2023, we conducted a final follow-up survey. And the result was that we were able to almost double the number of women with an adequate dietary diversity in all of the region. And in one of the region, we did more than double the number of women. We went from almost 28% to 67% of women that had an adequate dietary diversity. So MDD-W was actually a precious tool for us to evaluate our approaches and to evaluate the investment.
Deborah, we would like to ask you to please conclude.
Yeah, okay. So I will go, thank you to the conclusion. So after 8 years of implementation and our experience confirmed that we need more investment to go into the coordination of national food security and national food security and nutrition stakeholders. It's very important to also always integrate a specific women empowerment in the intervention. So for us, the multi-sectoral nutrition approaches are the one that needs to be promoted, and they require more investment and more effort on coordination. We also observe that dietary indicators such as the MDD-W and the food and security indicator, the HFIAS, worked really well, are effective and practical to monitor a nutrition-sensitive agriculture program. And for that, we also advocate for their integration in the national data collection system, specifically the MDD-W because of the gender dimension. Our experience also confirmed that in gender transformative approaches, it's important to put emphasis on the sensitization and the inclusion of men to make them better allies for women empowerment, and all of that for the benefit of the whole household. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Brenda, for that really comprehensive approach that really shows how we can bring different elements of food security, nutrition, transformative gender approaches together. And last but not least, I would like to invite Ms. Anira Bush, who is the Senior Policy Officer Division for Food and Nutrition Security Fisheries at BMZ, who will focus her intervention highlighting the importance of the Minimum Dietary Diversity for Women indicator, which, as we heard earlier too from Rachana, is one of the measures that the Joint Program on Rural Women's Economic Empowerment is using as well. So over to you, Anira.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon from my side. Yes, as our moderator was saying, I will focus on an indicator that is very much at the heart of German policy, which is the Minimum Dietary Diversity indicator. But before I go into the indicator, I would like to, building on what Deborah already told you from Togo, say a bit on our policy as regards Germany. You might have heard that this year our minister has actually launched a feminist development policy with gender transformative approaches being very much at the heart of that. And Deborah was telling you that in the project she works on, gender transformative approaches are being applied. That is actually something that we try to implement in all the projects that we do with my ministry, but also other projects that other ministries implement. And we are very happy that the CFS Voluntary Guidelines on gender equality and women's and girls' empowerment were endorsed today. We've worked a lot on that. So very happy that it was endorsed today. I think we do need political commitment, CFS Voluntary Guidelines, the projects that we implement. But as I was saying, we also need sound measurement tools. And the Minimum Dietary Diversity Indicator, the MDD-W, is that is where that comes into play. Because as most of you might know, women, and particularly women of reproductive age, especially those that are pregnant and that are lactating, do actually have higher needs as regards nutrient density in their food than men. And that is what the MDD-W indicator measures, provides indication on micronutrient adequacy of women's diet. So how that practically works is that women are asked what they have eaten in a number of days. So their food packages, for example, dairies and cereals, vegetables, and they ask what kind of food package have you actually eaten in the last days. And so very easy indicator that can be measured quite easily, and that measures the adequacy of a women's diet. The MDD-W was launched in 2015. There are already 55 countries that assess data on it, so quite a lot. And it's also being used by the African Union. It's being used by the Demographic and Health Surveys. And we, together with the European Union, and Renata has mentioned that, very strongly advocate for the MDD-W to be an SDG2 indicator. You know that the SDG2 indicators will be reviewed next year, and we very much hope that the MDD-W will be part of it. I have to say that there are some shortcomings of the MDD-W. It only measures adequacy of a healthy diet. It doesn't really go into utilization, and it mainly focuses on the global south, so it doesn't include other parts of the world. but we are very much convinced that the MDD-W is at the moment the best and only that we have to include it in the SDG2 indicators that will give us information on the quality of diets. We think that healthy diets is a very important part of a discussion that we need on the international agenda, and we hope that it will be integrated into the SDG2 indicators next year. At the same time, we're also, of course, still supporting other indicators on diet quality to be developed so that we will have more evidence on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anira, and for really, I think a key message from your intervention is we really have to think of women's nutrition as an important component of their empowerment, and we need to have the measures for accountability and for achievement of women's nutrition, and make sure that these are mainstreamed in the way we are tracking the SDG indicators. So thank you so much for that intervention. We have just about 6 minutes for some questions. But I would like to welcome any questions, any comments, if you can keep them extremely short in 4 minutes, so that I can also give another 2 minutes to our panelists to respond. So I have 2 right now. We will go to Lauren, and then we will go over there. Thank you.
Very quick question for BMZ.
And please introduce yourself
Yes.
as you do
Hi.
that. Thanks.
Lauren Phillips, Deputy Director of the division that works on gender equality here at FAO. The question is for BMZ. In the results that were shown by your colleague, are those with a control group, or are those just reported for the group that you're working in? Are you using a control to do an impact assessment?
I would like to ask that we take all, and then I'll come back to you. So the next question, please.
Thank you very much. I'm Cecilia Nordin van Gansberg, representing Siani, a non-profit organization from Sweden. And I'd just like to ask John Bosco Murangira to give us a few words about the men's participation, because I feel that is really very important, as we've heard in other interventions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? And I'm told we also don't have questions online. I will take that as an indicator that the panelists were very clear and succinct. And what I will do is just go from John Bosco to the end, even if there was no question for you. If you have one last remark that you would like to make in this last few minutes of the session, please do. So John Bosco from Sicilia, if you have a word on women, on men's participation in Rwanda.
Thank you so much. That's a great one. And I would like to mention that in Rwanda, actually, right away from the targeting, at least 30% of our beneficiaries of the program are men. So, and 70% are women. And among the main interventions that we have seen, as I mentioned, because of men engaged approach that we are approaching, we are using to make sure that men can embrace the empowerment of women, but also become gender champions to advocate for the interventions. We have seen, like I mentioned, like 3 concrete examples maybe that we have seen. One, we have seen confirmation that more than 75% of unpaid care work that was a burden to women have reduced in the households. Also, men are confirming that they are participating into the unpaid care work at household level, and hence giving women more ample time to participate into income-generating activities. Another element we have seen in Rwanda is reduction of gender-based violence. Because there was some social norms that when men could see women going into cooperatives, into groups, into GBR interventions, then it could be somehow resistant. But when they start to see the benefits of the program and transformational change happening at household level, then they had to embrace the program. And we have seen this being very transformational. Number 3, we have seen the leadership and participation of these women whom we said were very vulnerable. But when men have been seeing that these women are changing and everything is happening, then we are seeing a spillover effect into even our communities. And we're happy to say that even at local levels, they're requesting that more men should be considered to be part of the program because of the benefits we are seeing. So men engaged approach has been very, very transformative, and we carry it forward for phase 2. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John Bosco, and especially bringing this issue of unpaid care work, how we reduce, but also how we redistribute, and the role of men and the importance of engaging men and boys. Renata, would you like to have a last word?
Yeah, we have voluntary guidelines now. They remain paper with some ink on it if we don't use them. So I would plead to everybody to use the voluntary guidelines in the programs that are out there to see what could be adapted, and encourage everybody in your environment to use it. And also I wanted to laud the CFS multi-annual work plan that will be discussed probably tomorrow, I think. There is one work strand now, which is called uptake, which I like very much, because we have a lot of voluntary guidelines and policy recommendations, and the added value of them and their use on the ground is not always clear. So among these, among this work stream to support the uptake and to check where we stand, there is a forum on the uptake of the gender voluntary guidelines foreseen in 2024. And I have already recommended to my own headquarters that we need to engage there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Renata. And I think the key message being, if we do not implement the guidelines and make the commitments to actually do it, they will remain words on paper. And I can tell you, we didn't spend 2 years getting here for them to just remain words on paper. So that's a challenge to all of us. Thanks, Renata. State Secretary, any final thoughts?
Thanks. I don't think I understand the question, but I have something to say. I worked for about 10 years with the women in the slum areas in the international organization Slum Dwellers International. And my experience is from all these years that when the women takes the power on their own, they can change. You must think so, take the power for your own. Perhaps all these guidelines and the governments can help in some situation, but the most important is to take the power themselves. And these saving groups, for example, they save money to build their first house for their whole life. Perhaps after 60 to 70 years, they build their first house with water and sanitation. That is succeed. That belongs that women take the power in their own hands. And that's why I see that the women are there. It's necessary to have the women in the front, because when the men see what happens really, when women themselves can, in this saving group, for example, fix new house, real house for the first time, water, sanitation, then they follow. So I think that women is the most important. You have the power. We are just standing by.
Thank you, State Secretary. And please do not just stand by, be allies. When women have control over their lives, the world can change. And when men are with us as allies. Thank you so much. To you, and you have a specific question from Lauren.
Thank you very much. My words summing up would be political commitment, action, and monitoring. And that means what I've already explained. So we have the voluntary guidelines now, we have a political commitment, but we have to bring that into action. We have to use gender transformative approaches, including men in the actions, very important. And then we need to monitor what we're actually doing and if we're achieving something. The question on Togo, I think, was about if the program is only in Togo, right? If I understood it right.
When you measured the impact, was there a control group so that you can see
Okay.
what would have changed or not without the intervention?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. We actually, in my division, we have 50 different projects, and that project being one of them, it was concluded, as Deborah was saying, this year. So I can't give you information. You have to go to the GIZ colleagues that are also in the room, right? They might know that, but I think there's no representative of the project in the room. Yeah, but I can't tell you how if there was a control group or not.
Fantastic. There is a bilateral meeting right there. I would now like to turn to Beatrice, and Beatrice joined us to respond to any questions that were there for Rachana. She is this technical advisor for targeting gender and social inclusion at IFAD. Any words from you, Beatrice?
Thank you, Jemima. Perhaps I can add something to the question related to men's involvement, because this has been a very distinctive feature of the joint program on rural women economic empowerment. And we learned a lot during phase 1, so we tried to step up our engagement in this sense during phase 2. So what we piloted in phase 1 has been a household level approach. So really trying to get both men and women within the household to sit together to analyze their respective aspirations, understand workload divisions within the household, understand different livelihoods patterns so as to favor their ability to plan joint livelihoods. And as a consequence of that, understanding what were the gender-based issues that were hampering their ability to achieve the life of their dreams, basically. So we mostly used the gender action learning system approach, which Rachana mentioned in her intervention because it was piloted in Nepal, but actually even in Rwanda we have used this methodology quite extensively, and it has been very interesting to see the type of results that it has generated, because it linked to changing behaviors. And behaviors for what? Behaviors for improved nutrition, behavior for improved ability to take decision, increased respect, that, as John Bosco mentioned, that turned out to be a reduction in patterns of gender-based violence, ability of women to go where they want. In the case of Nepal, we had several women beneficiaries that were not allowed to get out of their home without the mother-in-law or the husband's permission. So we're talking about very powerful changes that have enabled to gain more voice, more decision-making power, and hopefully in a sustainable manner, because when you change behavior, you really change things in the long run, right? So these changes are there to stay. So as mentioned, this has been an initiative in a few countries in phase 1, but now we're adopting this approach in a more consistent manner in phase 2, trying to use it in I guess all the countries that are benefiting from phase 2. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. As we are waiting for Ambassador Ferrero, any more questions? Oh, there you are. Oh, thank you so much, and apologies, I didn't see you there. What I would like to do is really thank Sweden, Norway, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, who have been ardent supporters of the joint program on rural women's economic empowerment. Thank our partners, FAO, IFAD, and WFP. It is really the power of the UN system coming together, working closely with governments and other stakeholders to really facilitate and support the empowerment of rural women. With thanks to GIZ and BMZ for sharing the insights on your work on nutrition. And while we have been able to share a snippet of these two programs, what they do show us is how we can actually elegantly bring together to life the voluntary guidelines and the different elements of the voluntary guidelines in a holistic manner, and to show the impact that we can have on the ground. We know we need to take an intersectional approach. We know we need to take a much deeper approach that also engages men and boys. We know that we can and do have to facilitate women's rights and empowerment, including their voices, their agency, and their political empowerment. And we are actually calling on other partners, including donors, to really support the scaling up of this program to other countries to reach more women. With that, it gives me great pleasure to pass the floor to Ambassador Gabriel Ferrero, the chair of CFS, for closing remarks. Congratulations, Ambassador, on the endorsement of the voluntary guidelines. It is really your commitment to gender equality and your steadfast bringing together countries and stakeholders that we actually can witness this historic day when we have the guidelines endorsed. So thank you for your time and being with us, and the floor is yours.
I thank you very much indeed, dear Jemima, and thanks for being here. Also Carla from New York, from UN Women, State Secretary of Sweden, and representatives of BMZ and the German government, the European Union, WFP, FAD, and FAO. I'm so delighted to be here today at this side event to actually celebrate what already has been achieved this morning, just a couple of hours ago. Friends, we made it. We did it. And this is a collective achievement, but it is a collective achievement, but it has been led by, I must say, look at the key ambassadors here in Rome, look at the key actors in the United Nations system, look at the key capitals where ministers or vice ministers have mobilized, look at everywhere. The key enablers of this has been women. I must say that. And also some men that are really, no, it is important, some men that are really committed, that we found ourselves feminists, and we're really committed to make it happen. Sorry, I strongly believe that this is a massive step forward on the gender equality agenda. We may not see it at its full extent today, or maybe in the coming months or even years, but when the world is struggling in such a dramatic way, when it's finding it impossible to talk to each other, let alone agreeing, very especially in the multilateral system, and very especially and very unfortunately in the gender equality agenda, that it is even more difficult than ever to advance. What we find ourselves today is with a new multilateral agreement, with a new multilateral consensus on gender equality and on a very concrete ways to make it a reality in such a difficult space as our food systems, rural areas, and agriculture in general. As I used to say, so I said this several times, probably you have heard me saying this. My wife is an agronomist by training. And the first thing she heard when she completed her 6-year studies at the university was, what are you doing here? I mean, you're a woman. You're just not going to be heard by farmers or by cooperatives. So she found a very difficult, very tough time to find a job because she was a woman. And as I used to say, if my wife is an agronomist, university training, white, middle class, can we imagine the difficulties women and girls find everywhere, especially in our sector, in rural areas, in food systems? So what we just agreed this morning, thanks to you and those of willing, it may be imperfect, it may be less or maybe more, by the way, than many wanted or than many of us expected or would have liked to. But very frankly, when I read these voluntary guidelines, once again, what I see is that even if they are imperfect, even if they are a step forward, and of course it's just a start or just another brick on building gender equality, they really embed transformative guidance to countries, to governments, to civil society, to movements, to all the business community, of course, everyone. And what I see is that this indeed can make a change. This is why I would really like to call everyone, men and women, the UN system, acting together as we see today, and we have seen in the past through the Gender Transformative Approaches Initiative, the international community, different countries, different donors, all sorts of countries. Let's do this, make these guidelines really a big push for advancing gender equality. When this Committee on World Food Security, also imperfect, also difficult, agreed on voluntary guidelines on land tenure, some years ago, already more than 10 years ago, it was celebrated as well. It was judged as imperfect, it's not completed, whatever, but they were made an empowering tool for farmers, for landless workers, for rural dwellers, for poor people, for rural workers around the world, an empowering tool to consolidate, claim and consolidate and be recognized their rights to land tenure. They made a massive impact. And it's only after the years when we see that they are at the core of for instance, the Convention Against Desertification, when they faced the issue of governance of land. We'll hear this morning from the UN Convention on Biodiversity. They are also at the core of that convention. Let's make these voluntary guidelines on gender also an instrument that it will be recognized, not just today, but in the coming months and years, as a key transformative tool that advanced gender equality and women's and girls' empowerment. We can make it all together, working together, putting all the resources together, the ingenuity, and all the leadership together. So this is my hope, and this is what I encourage all of us to do. Thank you very much indeed, and congratulations.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, and for that call that it's on all of us to bring the guidelines to life in our work. With that, thank you all so much for joining us. I want to thank those who have joined us online. It's been a pleasure being your moderator. I am Jemima Njuki. I serve at UN Women in New York as the Chief of Economic Empowerment. Thank you so much for being with us.